welcome back to the Courage Sessions. My name is Enrique Hasso, and I'm the Associate Director of the Texas Health Education Service. Today we have a pretty helpful session coming along. We actually were able to do the Avengers Assemble for health professions advisors, and we've assembled a great team today of several health professions advisors. Just giving you a context of what you can expect during today's Courage session. Obviously, this is the year anniversary of everybody going to work remotely for about 2 weeks until this whole thing died down. We have all been affected by this pandemic in one way or another, and health professions students are no different. In fact, the amount of changes that have happened, we've all recognized have caused so much anxiety to a process that's already so intense and so well established over the years, and there have been so many changes. If you had asked us all even a year ago today, do you think the schools would ever do virtual interviews? I think we would have all given you a resounding no. And now it's the new norm. So joining us today, if we could start with Pam, and then we'll go Taya and Aaliyah. If you all could introduce yourselves, what your roles are at your institution, and then maybe a little fun fact about let's say the music you've been jamming out to this week.
Hi, I'm Pamela McNulty, Director of Pre-Health Advising here at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. And my role is to help navigate students who are interested in pre-health through the application process and hopefully into getting admitted into their professional programs. The majority of students who attend SMU are interested in medicine, going to medical school, but we do also work with other health professions such as dentistry, PA, physical therapy, and others. My fun fact about music, I think I'm going to twist this up a little bit in terms of what I've been listening to, is because this is a fun fact about music, is I was in a band in the mid-70s called Evolution Revolution, and our band actually opened for B.B. King in the Jackson Memorial Coliseum. So that's my fun fact related to music.
I'm gonna go out and look for that tape or vinyl or something.
Tape didn't exist back then.
No, I'm gonna find the one.
Was I supposed to say something else?
Oh no, thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, I'm unmuted, so I guess I'll go. Hi, I'm Taya Fabre. I am the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies at Houston Baptist University. I am also the faculty liaison for the pre-health office. So I do work with students that are trying to get into medical school and dental school and most of the health profession school, in addition to teaching chemistry. I can't think of anything that can top Pam's music analogy. I was not in a band. I did, however, perform at family reunions for my family in musical groups doing, I don't know, it was a group that was a Prince spinoff. I can't even remember. But we were very popular then, and no, there will be no video, Enrique.
I was about to ask.
No. No VHS.
Thank you. Aaliyah?
Thanks for having us, Enrique. My name is Aaliyah Bamani. I'm the Director of Academic Advising in the Office of Academic Advising at Rice University. I work with students across the spectrum in all different majors, all across campus. And so we work with specialized advising, predominantly med students, but anything in the health professions really works for us. And so it's a busy time of year for all of us, I know. In terms of music, I don't know that I can top the others, but I'm a Zumba lover. And so the Latin Zumba jam is sort of my thing right now.
Awesome. There's some great stuff out right now. All right, and just to be a team player, I don't have any musical abilities, whether it be joining a band in Zumba, and I have 2 left feet. And so I have been listening to a lot of 80s music right now. And in fact, just a few minutes ago, I was listening to some Lionel Richie. But anyway, all of that out of the way, thank you all so much for joining us today. I do also want to point out which one of you, how many of you are JAMP faculty directors as well?
I think maybe all of us.
All of us.
That's
Yes.
right.
All of us.
It's almost as if you all were strategically selected to join us for today's session.
Right.
Yeah. So questions about the admissions process, preparing, whether you are a junior looking to start your application for entry year 2022 in a few months or a few weeks now, or you are somebody who's applying next year, 5 years from now, maybe you're in high school and you decide to join us to learn more about the process. We're here to answer your questions. So just as a reminder, I am keeping track of all of the feedback that you're providing us in the Texas Health Education Service page. So if you have any questions, go to that page and ask us your questions. So I do have a set of questions here to kind of help us walk through some conversation. So number one, if we could talk about the overall journey to the application. And this is actually part of a larger project that we've been working on, but really just exploring the different steps that students have to take along the way, whether they be academic in terms of selecting courses and making sure they're following certain sequences, or whether they include different activities like shadow this year and make sure you have enough volunteer activity hours and things like that. So can we talk a little bit about how you all have seen your students affected, their plans affected by the pandemic and all of the activities that have been canceled?
Just a round robin. I'll go first. I think that for the students who were able to start right out of the gate as first year students, they most likely are the ones who have some in-person shadowing and volunteering, and they're applying with that experience. However, for the students who may have waited until their sophomore year, and if you think about it, COVID would have hit early spring of their sophomore year, and now they're juniors, they've really missed almost an entire year of in-person experiences. And so some of the lost experiences were summer programs, whether it was research or clinical experience and shadowing in a hospital. Lots of students had shadowing set up. Students had opportunities to go to, let's say, Peru or Belize to do some in-person community type services. Those have all been disrupted. And so I've just seen a variety of students who have been unable to continue with some of the things that they may have started with as first year students, or some of the things that they had hoped to start in their second year.
I can chime in here. I think similarly, everything that Pam just said for sure. But I teach a course that actually is on medical exploration, and it has a shadowing component to it. And it too got sort of side railed in all of this, right? And we weren't able to shadow at Houston Methodist, which is normally what our students do. But I think, the bright side of this is that there are some other activities that students can do and get involved with, and many have really taken advantage of that. I mean, right now, I'm sure Enrique is going to ask, well, what things can students do now, right? And so I would pivot and I would say, vaccination sites are open now like crazy. They need volunteers. American Red Cross, other community service places, nursing homes are opening back up to volunteers. Those are spaces that people can go into, hospice units, having conversations with physicians, right? It's funny, but you would think that you can't get exposure in your immediate circle, but you absolutely can. Do you have a grandparent maybe that suffers from some illness? Do you know about your grandparent in that way? Do you know what their regimen is? Do you know what medications they take and how their experience is with the healthcare system? These are things that you can do that you don't even realize, and they don't take a lot of resource. So, you know, while I know things have been shut down and it's been difficult, I think the challenge is to be innovative and creative to get out there and get some exposure.
Thank you
I
for
want to, yeah, I want to also add that prayerfully things are starting to look up a bit, but I would agree with what both said, that COVID related activities are on the rise that you can do. Just today I was out, and the vaccination at NRG is that setup is very intense. Also, I was thinking about Houston Food Bank. It's a lot of families affected with food, and especially we just had this snowstorm in Houston. But I love Aaliyah's idea of getting to know some things that are going on in your family. And I think my kids have kind of capitalized on that with elderly, with different issues, getting the vaccine and things like that. So I think that would really, really help investigate things in your family. But creativity is the key. And, you know, find out, why is it your passion? Why is it your passion, and what attracts you to it?
Yeah, I think early on when this whole thing started, and we did our first courage session with Dean Dr. Judy Ann Calloway from the Long School of Medicine, you know, she came on and talked about being creative with activities and being engaged. And I think being on the you know, a year into this, I think there is no wrong answer on the types of activities you can do. The only wrong answer is no activity. Because this is, you know, we've said this several times, this is sure to be a guaranteed question in every one of your interviews for the foreseeable future. What did you do during the pandemic to support other people? How did you engage with others to show your interest in the human condition, to show care for others? There's no wrong answer. You know, we've seen a lot of folks talking about virtual interview opportunities, which are fantastic. Dean Calloway was talking about, you know, going onto YouTube and doing your own research into the different functions of the body, the different systems, and just learning that way. I mean, we live in a fantastic age where you can volunteer just by going on your computer and helping people sign up for a vaccine in your neighborhood and making sure that everybody in your neighborhood has access. So there are tons of opportunities, just to reiterate what's already been said here.
And to pivot a little bit, we were talking about before the call, I think some of this stuff is going to stay around a long time because it is the best way to show your creativity. I mean, I always tell my students, okay, grades check, MCAT check. And now we're adding like, okay, shadowing check, volunteer check. But what are you doing that's unique? And I think that part, that creativity, is going to stay around.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really coincides with the core competencies that the schools have been talking about. You know, you have issues like resilience, adaptability, accountability to yourself and to others. I mean, what better way to show that than through experiences like this? So I think, yeah, A's all around. Those are the great responses. Thank you. Let's see. So we are still not getting any questions yet in the chat, but again, we welcome any and all questions that you all have. We have 3 health professions advisors here ready to go. I think the second major question that is really going to be asked is, what did these experiences do for you as an aspiring health professional? And I think that regardless of the pandemic or what's going on, these are questions that you all challenge your students to kind of explore in anticipation for their essay. So can I do a round robin again and just hear the type of advice that you're offering students, whether it be even now something that you've altered or something you've always said in regards to reflecting on activities and transferring that experience and the emotions and all the activities and everything that the students have taken away into their application?
I'll go first on this one because it's kind of passionate for me. I would say be truthful. This is what I always tell my students. Be truthful. And we talk to them about if it's some topic that makes you emotional, you may want to talk to us about it. It's okay to be emotional, but you also have to know how to come back from that and work it out. But right now, I'm really thinking about all the healthcare providers I see on TV. I know you guys see that they do have true emotions, right? And it's okay, but they still want to serve and they still want to help. So when you reflect, I just say be truthful with your emotions, with your feelings, because that's just one of the most important parts of being a good healthcare provider.
And Enrique, I'll jump in. One of the things that I encourage students to do from the very beginning, we have a seminar for our first year students at SMU and our incoming transfers, Pre-Health 101. And one of the things that I encourage students to do, again, from the very beginning, is to journal all of their reflections from the different experiences and to start that early so that they can see the progress and development of their interests all the way to application. I think that's so important, and that really didn't change in the pandemic because whatever experience you've had, in order to really be able to talk about the meaning and be introspective and the impact that it had on you and your decision to continue in medicine, I think it's important that you write that down and then you're able to reflect and extract from it when you write your personal statement. And just one other thing that I would add to this is because I worked in the healthcare field for about 15 years as a clinical scientist, and I have one of my best friends still works in that environment, and it has been tiring and taxing. And when I think students see the emotion and the energy and effort that's gone into getting us from the pandemic started almost a year ago until, as Kaya said, we are starting to get vaccines in arms. I think it's so important for students to make sure as they are making this important decision that it's a sacrifice and it's being a servant leader when you choose this occupation. So journaling and really being introspective will help you understand if this is really a calling or is this something that you're doing because maybe your family's doing it, but it's not your passion.
So I think I'll just add, I agree with obviously both Pam and Taya on this. But when we talk about meaning, I know students are probably thinking, how do they answer the question about their activities and their most meaningful activities, right? And that's probably, what is the forefront of your mind. And like Pam said, you really do want to make sure that you are reflecting. And in fact, I run a whole lecture on reflection in the class that I teach because it is critically important, right? And what you need to remember is what is meaningful about an activity? What was the transformative nature of the experience, right? What was its impact on you and your own personal growth? So it's not just about what you saw, but it's how it made you feel. It's how it transformed you and made you grow and mature and learn something about yourself that maybe you did not know prior to the experience.
And I'll just add to that about being able to write how it was meaningful to you because students, I know we hear this all the time. Students ask us, well, how can I be unique? How can I stand out? And as Taya said earlier, be authentic, tell your truth about an experience because two students could do the exact same experience and have different meanings and outcomes in terms of how it impacted them. And so I agree with both Aaliyah and Taya, which is, be introspective, be authentic, and tell your story. Your story is not going to be the same as someone else's story, but you also don't have a story if you don't have experiences that you've taken the time to understand what they meant to you personally.
Exactly. Thank you all so much for those insightful responses. I'm sure people are writing notes because I know I definitely was in reference to trying to help out folks in the future. So we've addressed taking meaning away from activities and identifying really meaningful activities. but kind of coming back to the issue of COVID with reapplicants who applied, say, entry year 2020 or entry year 2021, and we're now on the other side of the match, and perhaps they're having to see a way to start getting ready for the application again. This is a difficult year to improve your application. First, if I could get one of you to take a quick shot at what the typical advice is for reapplicants in terms of improving an application, and then perhaps somebody else take a shot at what you would advise a reapplicant who happened to have fallen into this year to try to improve their application and what they can do to improve.
I guess I'll start only because I recently met with students in this exact same situation. And my question to the student, and then I'll share my advice, is really what I think an admissions committee is going to look for, which is how have you improved your application from, let's say, last June until now? And the reality is, as hard as it is to hear this information, if there is no improvement because COVID happened, and you may be living in a state, maybe not Texas, where we're opening up, perhaps you're in a state that is still very closed down, and you've not been able to find employment, you've not had any virtual opportunities to learn and grow about your field in medicine. You've got a great GPA, you've got a great MCAT, but your experiences haven't changed. My advice is you likely need to wait, get some more experience, some meaningful experience, so that you can improve your application and be more competitive. But I'd be interested to hear what my colleagues would share, because again, this is something that I am currently, as I think we all are, dealing with right now.
Absolutely, Pam, I agree. I think, reapplicants are in this very tricky position. You've applied and maybe you're just coming off of a cycle, the most competitive cycle we've seen in Texas in a very long time. I think Enrique's statistic is something like 22% increase in the number of applicants in this cycle. So it's very competitive. So if you didn't get in, the question that I ask of our students here at Rice is, what about your application was weak, right? So let's look through things. Was it your activities, your leadership? Was it your grades? Was it your MCAT score? What was it that needs to be worked on? And let's look at that at a different lens. And then you cannot stay stagnant, right? So if the last year has been unproductive for you, reevaluate and do not apply, right? And if it has been productive for you, how do we put a light and shine those really cool, amazing things that you've done in the interim to make you a more viable applicant, right? It's very competitive. And as everybody has already said here, you have to bring your unique characteristics out. And so I think it goes back to reflection and again, seeing whether or not you're best placed to apply again, right? I always tell students, don't apply until you're at your peak, right? If there's something you think you can do to get better, then why are you applying? Wait until you've done that thing and then apply. So that's my advice to reapplicants.
I agree. I agree with Pam about waiting to apply. I also agree with Aaliyah about being honest about what was the weakness and addressing it. And, even if COVID wasn't here and you were doing, for example, if you went and worked a job in research, but was that your weakness in your application before? So you have to really address what your weakness in your application before you engage in that activity.
And the one thing I'll add, Enrique, and I tell my students this pre-COVID, post-COVID, during COVID, med schools aren't going anywhere. People will continue to get sick. There will always be a need for healthcare professionals. Therefore, don't rush it. It is so competitive. It is so expensive. It is so time consuming. As Aaliyah said, don't apply until you have the very best application that you can present. And if you don't have that, there's nothing wrong with waiting. I think students should want to go into this process feeling confident, not hoping someone will look at their application and give them one interview, but going into this cycle feeling like they should get multiple interviews. And that all comes back to reflection and being introspective, I think.
Well said. Thank you so much for that feedback. And as far as folks who are looking to reapply this year, we do have an episode of the podcast with Dr. Deb Beck, where she talks about preparing to reapply and really taking a candid look at your application and identifying areas for improvement, as Aaliyah mentioned. We do have a couple of questions that have come into the chat on the same topic, so we're going to go ahead and start getting to those. So first question, and this is several questions, so we're going to take them one at a time. First question, in regards to timing, what is your advice on how I should approach this cycle in terms of applying? And so applying timeline for this cycle, what advice are you offering?
Same advice.
Quickly.
Apply early. Apply when it opens. Same advice. No different advice for me.
But apply when your application is at its best. One of the things that I'm super excited about is TMDSAS no longer allows you to open the application and apply within that same day or week. And I think that is really going to help students who have been in this rush to be first. Yes, you want to get your application out early and you want to be in that batch of early applications that go out to med schools, but you also don't want to rush it. You want to take your time. You want to, I'm old school because I'm older, but you want to take your time. You want to go through your application. You want to print it out. You want to read through it. Not on a computer screen, but read it as it's printed out to make sure that you don't have any mistakes, and then look at it again and press submit. So I think the advice that we're all giving is, yes, apply early because, early applications are what lead to early interviews, but don't jump the gun so quickly that you've not taken the time to look for mistakes that might be in your application that will really hinder you from getting interviews.
And I would also add, don't underestimate the timeline. You can right now look at some applications or look at the process to see what's needed, because it never fails that this will be during final exam time in May. And, you're going to be finishing your final exams and try to jump right into this and just, pace yourself. So start looking at the sections. It's a lot of information. We say this in our workshops. It's a lot of information they're asking for. Start gathering the information. But I'm with Pam, especially since we've been doing a lot of virtual learning. Print it out and read it. Don't just look at the computer and say, oh, I got it. I see it. Print it out for yourself and read it and check it. That's a good idea.
My one tip is always to read it out loud. You catch a lot more errors when you read things out loud. So, I always tell students, when you write it, you put it away for a little bit, then you come back to it, you read it out loud, and you'll really get a sense of the mistakes that have been made. And right now with competition the way that it is, to get into medical school, you don't want grammatical errors or sentence structure issues to be the reason your application gets tossed aside.
And if I could provide a quick aside, I think Pam broke some news before TMDSAS has addressed it to the public. That's all right. That's all right. Well, just hi everybody. Enrique with TMDSAS here. We are moving toward delaying the transmission of applications this cycle by 2 weeks. So the application will open the first week of May. I believe it's May 3rd, and then applications cannot be submitted until 2 weeks later. We'll provide the exact dates as they come out in the next few weeks, and definitely keep an eye out for the application handbook. It's really no secret. We've already shared this information with all of our advisors, but we hadn't really come out and shared that with everybody. So in case that raised any flags with anybody out there, this is what's going on. And it's really to the benefit of the applicant more than anyone. For all the reasons mentioned, printing out your application and looking it over helps you make sure that you're not missing an essay. So many times we've had on day one of the application, somebody calling the office and saying, I put a placeholder of a period in my essay. Can I go back and change that? That is not one of the sections that we allow you to make changes to. And all of this is clearly stated in the applicant user agreement. So this information is, or this time allotment is really there to help you as the applicant to make sure that you have sufficient time and not feeling really rushed to get it in on day one. Secondly, coming back to the original question about timing, I believe this is kind of a coded question in terms of what does it mean to apply early. I know a few years ago we published some information that really encourages applicants to submit by the end of July. And we're taking a look at researching other variables beyond just submission date, but really what's important for you as the applicant to recognize is that the interviews season begins in late July for many schools. And so at that point, the admissions committees have been meeting for several weeks. And so what we encourage you to do is to submit your application as early as possible to allow these admissions committees as much time as possible to review your application and come back and offer you an interview position. Do remember that the TMDSAS application can be submitted even if you don't have a test score yet, and even if you don't have your letters of evaluation yet. As a reminder, transcripts will not be requested until later in the fall when offers of admission start going out. And so, yeah, just pace yourselves, submit your application as early as you possibly can, but do remember that the application is open until the end of October. If the schools really wanted your application on July 30th, they would have set the deadline on July 30th. So if you can't get it in by then, if your application's not ready, take your time and do the best job that you can on your application. But these are kind of like the guidelines that we offer.
Can I add one more thing about that?
Sure.
Second, when you say pace yourself, it's not just about the primary application, it's also about those important secondaries that come from the medical schools. And I feel like some students don't understand or recognize that their applications aren't complete at the medical school until they've completed their secondary essays. And so when you're thinking about the application timeline, don't just think about the primary application. You've gotten it done, you press submit, okay, I'm good. No, you're gonna have those secondary applications or essays that come from the individual medical schools, and you've got to pace yourself in getting those back because your application is still pending at the medical school when you have a secondary application or essay. And the one thing I will say about that is, students, please, please make sure when you do those secondaries that you are doing your research on that individual medical school. You cannot copy and paste or have cookie cutter essays to go to all of the different medical schools. Each school is unique, and when you are completing your secondaries, they're looking for you to tie your uniqueness with their uniqueness. And that's so important. I really believe that the interviews come from the answers to the secondaries. Primary tells them that you're smart, you have a great MCAT score, you can be a doctor. But the secondary is what tells them, are you a good fit for our medical school? So definitely pace yourself when it comes to not just your primary, but your secondary.
And there are only a handful of schools that don't require a secondary application. So make sure that you allot time for all of those secondaries, because it is another host of essays that you need to complete. And just to further help with planning, we mentioned submitting your application mid-summer. And just do keep in mind that it takes 2 to 4 weeks for TMDSAS to process your application and get it out and transmit it to all the schools. At that point, the schools start taking a look at your application, reviewing it, and deciding, some of them decide to whom a secondary application can go out. And then you have additional time. So from the point that you hit submit to the time that your application is complete at the school, it could be 2 months, maybe even 10 weeks. And that's not taking into account stuff like Casper, making sure that your MCAT scores are in, making sure your letters are in, and really having that complete application. So there is a lot of time that is devoted to just processing and making sure that everything is in. All right, so we have another question here about, let's see, for applicants, especially non-traditional students who started a little bit more than a year ago, is it okay to have a multitude of different short stunts at various volunteer clinical activities instead of a couple of activities with a long history? I feel like most of my meaningful activities, reflection might be constructive in my short duration. So I think this question is asking, particularly for non-traditional students, is it bad to have a lot of shorter activities versus having longer term activities?
I think,
Sorry,
oh,
Pam.
no, Aaliyah. You go, Aaliyah. I'll go next.
All right, for me, I think it's about what you get out of these activities more so than the duration. Now, obviously, to some extent, when you interact or engage in activity for a longer period of time, you have something more substantive to reflect on. But, shorter activities are also meaningful, right? And they still allow you to reflect on your motivation to medicine, right? And they still allow you to get some of that exposure to talk about your experiences, right? And really show people what you learn from them. So, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with being a non-traditional applicant. I think it's actually really cool because there's some unique things that you'll bring to the table that your peers may not. And I think it's all about, how you bring meaning to those activities, even if they're short in nature, and especially with the pandemic times, right? A lot of people have only had short activities, and that's okay. They still show resilience and productivity.
And I'll just piggyback on that and just say that short is better than none. Because again, right now we have lots of students who, by virtue of maybe where they live or maybe they've had to help their families, they have zero activities. So I would say try to convey the meaning of each one of those different activities and be able to explain, how it impacted you, what you gained from it. And there is something to say about having some variety. Yes, medical schools and professional schools prefer consistent and sustained activities throughout your academic career or throughout your gap years. However, med school deans have told us they are obviously going to be flexible in terms of evaluating applications. It doesn't mean that you can't have any experience, you have to have some, but they do recognize and understand that consistency is probably something that was disrupted because of the pandemic.
And I agree with both comments, but I would also add, I was thinking about Pam saying, if you reflect on each of your activities, and if you could possibly find some common denominator between those, even though they were different, that might be good also. Some way to tie it all together at the end, if you could do that. And just keep in mind, this is going on in the world. It's not just medical students. I'm thinking about my high school students trying to get into college. We're doing holistic reviews now. So every person is trying to present themselves in a way to be noticed and to gain admittance, I think, in a way.
Yeah, marketing yourself is so important nowadays. All right, so we're going to go make a little bit of a shift, and because I really want to make sure we make enough time for this topic about letters of evaluation. Just as a quick survey of the room here, which of your schools have the option to submit a committee letter as part of the health professions? Okay, all three. Awesome. And surely you all have also advised students who maybe opted to submit letters individually. as well. And so if we could just do a real quick taking a look at just the overall process. What does a health professions committee letter do for an applicant? And then also, if you could give us a quick view into what that process looks like, and then we'll come back and talk about individual letters.
Well, we are literally starting our HPRC interviews in about 2 weeks. Yes. So I'll just go real quickly on what our process looks like. Our students submit a packet, and that packet includes a personal statement, a resume that's really geared around their pre-health experiences and activities. There are a few short essays that they also must complete, and they have to have a minimum of 3 academic letters, 2 from science professors, and the third could be a science, but we encourage them to choose a letter from maybe someone in humanities. In terms of the HPRC letter, the committee evaluation letter, I like to describe it as a narrative. The student has a narrative in their personal statement. The professors and their letter writers have a narrative in their letters of recommendation. But I see my role as providing a narrative for the student that includes, what the letter writer has said about them, what their strengths are, if they have any weaknesses that they've worked to improve on. And so it's like giving the admissions committees kind of a whole pie. That's how I use it. Instead of many slices, they get a whole pie, and that's what the committee evaluation letter does. It gives context to the student because every student is different, and perhaps you had a lower GPA or an MCAT score that was not as competitive as you'd like, but you also worked 25 hours a week and you could not pay for a prep course. So the purpose, I think, of the committee letter is to give a narrative of the student, a complete narrative from all of the different pieces that admissions committees receive in the application cycle.
I would say we do something similar where we do mock interviews and we do have them submit a packet, but we have them submit some documents about themselves, like activities and research and we know their grades, employment, leadership, and things like that. The committee, the evaluation committee will interview them first, do the mock interview, and those who go through our process will then qualify for the letter. We actually let all of our science faculty contribute if they so wish. So our big thing is is the composite letter your best letter? That's what I always say. Because for me, it's like, how have you interacted with science faculty besides them saying you made good grades? Were you a teaching assistant? Do they remember how you stood out in class? So that's just basically how ours is done, but we do require them to go through our workshops and then go through the mock interview first, and then we submit those names of those students to all of our science faculty. We are integrating faculty from other disciplines because sometimes a different perspective can help also.
Yeah, so we're somewhat similar. At Rice, what we do is we have a health professions advising committee as well, just like the others. Our committee has professional advisors, health professions advisors, as well as faculty across the disciplines, because we think that that is important. What a student does at Rice is they open a file, which sounds kind of arbitrary, but what that means is they're expressing interest in applying into this next cycle. And that way they're on our radar. We know that they're entering this process, they have intentions to apply, and then it kind of trickles down into lots of layers of support. So there is sort of an application that they submit to us with all materials, and it is mocked out after the AMCAS and the TMDSAS applications. And so we ask pretty much all of the questions that those applications ask and then some. We also require, things like if they have an MCAT score, a personal statement draft, a summary of what they did in high school. These are all things that we look at. And then students will get individual appointments with academic advisors in the Office of Academic Advising. They are 45-minute long appointments to critique all of the materials that they've supplied, to give them some advice, all of that kind of stuff, some guidance. And, you know, oftentimes a student might decide after that interval that they're not ready to apply. And so they might, you know, decide to get out of the process at that point, or to continue forward. And if they continue forward, it's great. They would supply us all this stuff, right? We write that letter, that committee letter. We also collect all the individual letters from their individual recommenders, and we put it together as a committee packet. And I think just to describe, you know, what that letter is from the committee, it's really an in-depth, personalized letter of evaluation that accompanies the individual letters of support that were requested by the student. And that's what we call our committee packet. And really what we aim to do is represent a student's candidacy for admission to medical school. So it's, if you will, it's an institutional backing of support for each student that's really customized and tailored to them. So it highlights, we call it a highlight reel of the amazing things that they have done over time.
Enrique, if I could just add one more element, I forgot to mention that the students do interview with faculty across the campus. Usually it's biology, chemistry, physics, and we have philosophy, sociology, and their input is very important because they have a perspective that's different from the science faculty. But the one thing that I would remind students about in terms of the committee process, whatever it looks like on your home campus, is that is an evaluation that goes with you and your application to medical schools. So when you go through this process, make sure that you are taking it seriously and make sure that you're giving your best as you go through the interview. And we actually, Tyler, we try not to call it a mock interview here because I encourage the students to go to our career center and do all of their practice, because when they come to us, they're actually being evaluated, and that evaluation is going with them. And so I just encourage students to take the process seriously, but also know that on each of our campuses, our goal is to support you, but our goal is also to be authentic. What the medical schools don't want us to do is say everyone's great if they're not great. That does not do a service to our institution. It does not do a service to any of our students. And so I do want students to be aware, because I think sometimes the thought process is, well, it's my campus, and so of course they're going to say all wonderful things about me. We have to be truthful in what we are saying. Therefore, we expect you to come with your best so that we can share your best.
Let me add to that. You just made me think of something. We do have other people on our committee from other parts of the university. And I do tell the students, pretend you don't know me, because a lot of times it's science faculty and they've had you in a class. So, you know, it's harder. But I just was on a call with some students doing one of my workshops virtually. So the students get on the workshop and they all have their cameras off. You know, most of them have their cameras off. We're on this workshop. I'm talking about interviewing, you know, and normally when we're in person, we tell them to dress up like in the workshop so we can get some examples of what, you know, what's supposed to be. So anyway, we're virtual. And I said, it may be virtual. I said, you guys, why don't you turn your camera on? And they, some of them did. And I said, look at your backgrounds. I mean, if you don't practice this now, when it's time to do the real thing, you're going to get caught. You know, look at the wall. I can say to some of them, you're sitting in front of blinds. I can't see the light behind you, or, you know, some are in their bedrooms, or, you know, I said, every time we do a process like this, even though it's a virtual, and that's just another subject, it may be a virtual interview, you need to practice everything in that way. So half of them turned it on. The other half may have been driving or something, but you always have to be prepared. You always have to treat it like it's the real thing.
And I think that's the health professions admissions committee packet, committee letter, whatever it may be called at individual schools, is really a fantastic tool that really culminates your experience in working with a health professions advisor. As our team here mentioned, it involves mock interviews, it involves offering feedback on your application, it involves making sure that the message of all of your evaluators is reflecting what you're trying to say in the application. And it's a really wonderful resource available to so many students, but unfortunately, not all students. And we do have other folks who opt not to use the committee packet or committee letter, but rather to submit individual letters. And I do want to emphasize that this is a question that we've asked of our admissions deans at medical, at dental schools, about which they prefer. Is there weight given to one or the other? There is not. The thing is that when you submit your letters individually, the onus is on you as the applicant to really make sure that your evaluators fully comprehend what the schools are looking for, that you explain to them, here are the core competencies, these are the things I want to highlight in my application, here's what my resume looks like. If you recall, a year ago, I came to you with this issue, and this is something I speak about in my essay. And all of the things that an advising center would help you out with identifying your application, you now have to do on your own. So there is no weight given by the professional schools on whether committee packet or individual letters is better. The thing
And
is,
let me just add,
oh yeah, go
before
ahead.
you send the link to the individual person, you should let them know of all the things that Enrique just mentioned, because oftentimes I get requests to write a letter before I am asked to write the letter. So just make sure you provide all that background information before you actually do the requesting from the from the school.
Yeah.
And I would say that's part of our coaching, is to let students know how to request strong letters of recommendation. If you don't give your letter writers the information that they need to write strong letters, then there's no way that they can tell your story. But as Taya just said, and especially because faculty is so busy and you have to be respectful of their time, it's important to have the conversation with them first on whether or not they can write you a strong letter, because if they can't, then you should go and find someone else. And I personally think, and that's part of the coaching, is students should have a conversation with a faculty member, whether it's virtually on a Zoom call or if you're on a campus where you can go in, have that personal connection before you ask for the letter. As she said, don't send an email or a link requesting a letter. The professor may not even remember who you are. And then one other quick thing I'd like to say is AAAMC does provide a really good guidelines to letter writers. And so if you're working with maybe science professors, and I mean, math and chem, they all know about writing letters for professional school. But if you're asking a Spanish professor or maybe your coach, I just think it's a good idea to use that information, because it really does highlight the attributes, the core competencies, and what med schools are expecting in the letters of recommendation.
And we just shared that in the chat, a link to that page, because it's a fantastic resource. And I do want to emphasize, as we went through each of the different schools, the process is going to be different between schools. Some schools may seem more difficult to get through the process. Other schools, it may seem like, wow, there's so many roadblocks in my way. But at the end of the day, this is a free resource that students are paying for. And I would much rather hear Pantaya or Aaliyah tell me no than to hear one of the professional schools tell me no. These health professions advisors are well-trained, attend regular meetings, are at the forefront of developing resources for students to help them be successful. You three are not just random people we picked off the streets and just love judging others. you all engage with the professional schools. If you need to call a professional school and ask to speak to the admissions dean, you have that rapport, you have that collaboration with them. So the feedback that these health professions advisors are offering is not here to intimidate you, is not here to impede you or serve as a roadblock. This is here to help you, and hopefully, this process doesn't scare you off. Because I know it sounded like a lot as we kind of went over the process a little earlier, but really, at the end of the day, they're here to help you get in. All right. Let's see. We have another question, and this one has to do more with individual letters. So now if we could take a look at the other side of the coin here, and I believe this student might be a non-traditional student. Yeah, if you're a non-trad, and started prereq classes during COVID, are the 2 science faculty directors a hard requirement? I've developed good relationships with one, but I fear if I had to get another one, it might not be as meaningful. Could I substitute that for a recommendation from a different faculty from my prior non-science major who knows me longer and better? So let's take this question from the perspective of somebody who is doing their letters as individual letters rather than doing a committee letter. What advice would you offer the student?
So I would say one science is probably essential. You need one science professor to really speak to your foundational skills and academic rigor. We encourage students to have a faculty member in their major, right? So it could not be a science, but it's another faculty that could speak to some other skill sets, right? And the diversity of your portfolio of academics. And then I would say, the third piece for me is sort of a character reference, right? And so sometimes, when you have individual letters, that might be in the form of a PI from a research experience could be great, a coach if you're an athlete, a music teacher of some sort, any activity or volunteer thing that you're involved in, somebody who can speak to things outside of the classroom as well.
Thank you.
I would just add, we do offer just a standard cover letter to accompany individual letters, and we still, work with those students in terms of coaching them on who they should choose for their letter writers. But I agree with Aaliyah, if you're an engineering major and you really only know one BCPM, biology, chemistry, physics, math, your science GPA professor, but engineering can speak very strongly to your creativity and discipline and hard work, then that you should definitely get a letter from that discipline, especially if it's in your major.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we are running low on time, but I did want to do a quick round of is it here to stay? Yes or no? Just a quick run through. We'll do a thumbs up, thumbs down. Here to stay is yes, upward, or no, that's going down. So if you could each take a look into your crystal ball of all the things that you know. Here to stay, virtual interviews, yes or no? Who can know? It looks like most of the schools will be using virtual interviews again, at least as long as the pandemic is impeding a lot of these activities. Virtual shadowing. Okay, it looks like we're pretty split on that. Maybe a hybrid option in the future. Online courses being accepted. We'll see what the schools say on that. Pass-fail courses continuing to be accepted beyond the spring semester, particularly for prerequisites in that reference. The TMDSAS and other application deadlines being extended. Okay, well, for this application cycle, we are going to continue to provide an additional month from what we usually do. What about interview cycles being extended? This year we added an additional month when we pushed back that match to March. Okay. What about the courage sessions? Those are definitely continuing on. We're here to support you all in every step of the way. So if you have any questions after the fact, we're very glad to help out. Please do join us in our online communities, the TMDSAS Hub, which is available to any and all current and or prospective applicants for TMDSAS, and also the TMDSAS Non-Traditional Applicants group, which is open to all non-trads. Before we let you all go, these are courage sessions, and we do allow you an opportunity to provide some words of encouragement to our current and future applicants. So one last round robin just for the tour here.
I would just say that if medicine, dentistry, whatever your passion is, and it is something that you feel a strong calling for, don't give up. I know that sometimes obstacles get in the way. You have challenges that make you feel as if you're never going to reach that goal. But if you are a hard worker, if you are resilient and you persevere, and if this is something that is truly your calling, then don't give up. Just keep going, because again, med schools aren't going anywhere, and you don't have to be 24 years old to start med school. I've seen people start med school at 50.
Right. I was thinking the same thing Pam's thinking, except when we were talking about the non-traditional student, I almost don't like that term because everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has where they fit in. So just use your strengths and your experiences and it will be fine if that's truly your passion.
I would agree. I would say be yourself. Let yourself shine. There's so many great characteristics about you, and it's just about letting other people see those same things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Pam, Taya, Aaliyah, thank you so much for the great insights, great advice. We'll definitely be doing this again in the future. And for those of you joining us, thank you so much for all of your participation and questions. On behalf of TMDSAS, the Texas Health Education Service, and everybody here, we'd like to wish each of you all the best of luck. And just remember that we're here for you, and it's going to be worth it at the end of the day to go down this path. So keep at it. All right. And we'll see you next time.